COVID-19 precautions are challenging us to stay at home and to stay away from each other. We're needing to care for ourselves in a way that's totally different than anything we've ever done. Over the past several weeks, I've been jotting down some reflections and thoughts, and as I've been sifting through it, I started realizing what I've been experiencing very personally is loss. And associated with loss is grief. Loss of routine, loss of opportunity, loss of connection, loss of interaction. So then I started thinking about Elisabeth Kubler-Ross and her work in grief. And I was first introduced to this by way of this book, On Death and Dying. This book I picked up when I went to see a show in a theater, and as I'm exiting down the aisles, I see this book just sitting there. So I picked it up. Not really sure what I had picked up, but I'm glad I did. And I've studied this, and perhaps you have too. It's based on observation, anecdotes. It's not necessarily based on empirical science, but the wisdom is tried and true. Here's what she says, based on her work as a medical director, interacting with patients who have experienced those last days on earth and their families who have grieved the loss. There are stages of grief. Stages. You go from one stage to the next. At first, it might appear as though the stages are linear. A leads to B, leads to C. Almost like you're walking down a path. But it's not so much a walk down a path as it is dancing a shuffle when you no longer have your dance partner, and right when you realize you don't have your dance partner, someone shoves you, and you can't keep rhythm with the dance. So I find Elisabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief to be a helpful tool because it gives us language when we're oftentimes without words. So maybe this can be a tool to help you interpret where you are and what's going on in life for you. Denial. Denial is the first stage. Think back to January and February. When we first heard about the coronavirus, we thought it was just something impacting a few people on the other side of the world. And then in mid to late February, we started hearing about people taking precautions in our own country. We couldn't fathom this really impacting us locally, much less at our church. And then we started realizing at the beginning of March, we needed to stop shaking hands and stop hugging at church and give each other the old elbow bump. In fact, after that first Sunday, my elbow was actually hurting by all the elbow bumps. And then do you remember the week of the ACC men's basketball tournament? That was bizarre because we thought that the games would be played. Then there was talk about the games still happening but nobody in the stands. Then they ended up canceling the tournament partway through. Then there was talk about school being canceled. Then Bishop Leland made the advisory comment that our churches should, at least for a couple weeks, not have public gatherings. At first we thought, no, this can't be true. There must be something wrong. This cannot be accurate information. Denial. We couldn't believe what was coming our way. And before we knew it, there were more cancellations. And along with the cancellations, there were questions. Lots of the questions dealt with denial of the reality. And when we first entered into this denial, it gave us a chance, if we noticed what was happening, gave us the chance for some inner exploration, some self-examination. But then that leads us to the second stage. Anger is the second stage. As the reality continued to set in, we responded with anger. And for many people, anger was found in hostility. But for many people, it looks more like disappointment. That's especially true for people who have a safety net of friends and family, and certainly who have a financial safety net to help soften any personal loss that might happen. For example, thinking about responding with anger. Heard the story recently about a high school senior who is angry about the senior prom being canceled. Now, please note, I don't judge her at all for this, but part of what's interesting about this is there are other things that she and her classmates will not get to experience, like a last assembly, saying goodbye to certain teachers and people, not being able to walk across the stage to receive her diploma in the timeline that she had always anticipated. Those are just disappointments. But the prom, now she's angry. We've all responded with different levels of anger and disappointment, some with great intensity. How about you when it comes to church life? Disappointment about worship, Sunday school, meetings, gatherings, meals, events, Bible studies, service opportunities, these things not happening. We're disappointed, angry, frustrated. And that leads us to ask ourselves the introspective question, why am I so angry? Why am I responding with such fury? Bargaining is the third stage. As a way to manage our anger, we start to bargain. We come up with, well, what if we try this? Or maybe if we did this instead? Or maybe things aren't actually the way we think they are. Maybe we can nudge it a little bit. There's still bargaining happening in the world of professional sports. Heard recently that Major League Baseball is thinking of taking all of the teams, sequestering them, some to Arizona, some to Florida. They would all stay with the teams, with their families, and play the games, but not have anybody in the crowds. Again, bargaining, trying to come up with what can we possibly do. Bargaining could lead to creativity. And that's part of what we have found in the church office. Lots of creative ideas, some that we've thought through and we realized, nah, probably not a good idea. If you're curious about what some of those ideas that got thrown into the wastebasket are, I'd be happy to share them with you. But bargaining could lead to creativity, trying to think of a creative way out of our dilemma, trying to think about a path forward. Oftentimes, though, bargaining can only get us so far because we try and it doesn't work out. We try again, it doesn't work out. And it could lead us right back to the stage of denial and then possibly anger again. But the more we bargain, oftentimes the more exhausted we get. And that has a way of affecting us physically, mentally, and emotionally as we're processing grief. Depression is the fourth stage. And let's be clear, the way that Kubler-Ross uses the word depression, she means being down in the dumps or feeling the blues. In today's world, the word depression is oftentimes used by clinical psychologists to diagnose a mental illness. If you or somebody that you know shows signs of depression, please seek help from your medical doctor. This is very important and something that everybody should take very seriously, because when people are suffering from depression, they need professional medical help. That's different than being down in the dumps or experiencing the blues. I think all of us have experienced the blues over these past several weeks. And some of us find ourselves wondering, am I ever going to get out of it? That could lead to a dark place, a downward spiral. But it could also lead us to the fifth stage of grief, which is acceptance. When we're in the blues about social distancing, not being able to see our family members, not being able to hang out with our friends, having to cancel that vacation, not being able to hug the people we love, we realize that being down in the dumps is not a way to live. And we get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so we accept our current reality and we figure out a way to move forward. You've heard the phrase new normal. We are now in a new normal. I'm curious about that phrase because I think as the conditions continue to change, the new normal will become new again. And what we called the new normal a week ago will all of a sudden seem old. We need to continue adapting. The COVID-19 pandemic is going to impact our lives not just this year or the next year, likely for the rest of our lives. But how? We don't know yet. Nobody knows yet. But we're going to figure it out together. David Kessler has done some work expounding upon Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, and he claims that there is a sixth stage, finding meaning. Now, I like to think we in the church, inspired by the Spirit of the living God, are equipped to help find meaning for our own lives and help to interpret meaning for the world. And I pray that in these days and weeks ahead, we can continue to pray for God's guidance as we find meaning in our current reality. My cheerwine's almost out. It's time to go. I'll look forward to another time for Cheerwine Chats. Thanks.